Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web novel All's Fair in War, taken from Reddit with the author's approval. Mason took slow, steady steps into the presentation room, making sure to keep his mind focused solely on the task ahead of him. It would be the most important thing that he's ever done, after all. He came upon a door to the meeting room, and first thing he noticed was that it was rather unassuming. The door was made of simple sprite oak, and the handle was unfurnished yet nicely polished silver. Compared to the gold trimmings and encrusted gemstones common in architecture in the capital, the very room with which most influential members of society controlled the vast fairy war machine was rather plain. I guess military types aren't fond of embellishments. Either way, I can't let that distract me, not when I have the most important moment of my life coming up. Mason took a deep breath and knocked on the door 3 times. A blue sigil that he had never seen before flashed 3 times, seemingly in response to his knocks. "You may enter," he heard a feminine voice call out, seemingly coming from all around him. Usually he'd be confused, but as he knew who exactly he was dealing with, he chose to stay courteous and do as instructed. He placed his hand on the surprisingly cold handle and gently pushed it downwards until he heard a click. With one final deep breath, he stepped into the dimly lit room. The first thing that drew his attention was that the interior of the room was also sparsely decorated. The furnishings seemingly been rather Spartan, with the sole exception of the meeting table in the center of the room. On it were thousands and thousands of miniature carvings, each one representing a world conquered by the fairies, each one a world civilized by the Empire. Every single carving was also densely packed with gratuitous amounts of aether, which greatly confused Mason. "Touch carving, and the answer to your question will be clear to see," a low, rumbling voice called out. Mason walked up to the table and did so, touching a carving depicting the conquest of what looked like a plant-like race. His vision suddenly blurred, and when he refocused a couple of seconds later, it seemed that he was no longer in a meeting room. He was in the middle of a raging battle. All around him he could see a group of animated trees, each one towering 20 feet tall. Each one was being handled by a group of fairy soldiers, and though each tree was formidable, there was only so much that they could do when dealing with the fairies' superior magic. The trees were set ablaze by fairies, yet even that didn't seem to deter them from the fight. Instead, many trees took the opportunity to leap into the center of fairy ranks and swing their burning limbs around, causing as much damage as possible at the cost of their own lives. However, there was only so much each tree could do. As each one was burned down or cut apart, their numbers dwindled further and further, until there was none left on the battlefield. Even the tree's artillery that was stationed nearby was completely destroyed. By this point, the stench of blood and sap was overwhelming. Yet Mason couldn't keep his eyes off the titanic wooden citadel he saw in the distance. That must be what they're fighting for, what they wanted to protect. He saw a dozen squadrons of dragonfly fighters quickly approaching the citadel, one carrying a large amount of aether primed for detonation. It dawned on him what he would soon witness to. And so, a wave of guilt washed over his body. Nevertheless, it was overshadowed by a grim mix of resolve, acceptance, and thrill. That's what they get for pointlessly resisting us, I suppose. At the very least, their lives would be better as a part of our empire. Mason chose to look on and take everything in. He didn't even dare to blink as the dragonflies released their payload onto the citadel. Condensed balls of aether were falling towards his targets, and the split second before they detonated, Mason braced himself. Time itself seemed to stand still as titanic flames engulfed the citadel briefly, which was quickly followed by an enormous, all-consuming explosion. The citadel was destroyed completely, with the explosion being so powerful that the heat was almost unbearable from where Mason was standing many miles away. Mason took a few steps forwards, intending to get a closer look at the former citadel, which was now a mere crater. Yet his vision blurred once again. He was back in the meeting room, except this time it was on the presence of 12 different fairies, all of which were closely observing him. "Do you know what you just saw?" questioned the tallest, most well-built one of the bunch. Mason realized that he was the same one who ordered him to touch the carving in the first place. "My goodness, is that General Hiss? He had better get this right, or who knows what might happen to me." Mason cleared his throat before replying, I believe that it was a conquest of Turin, which took place 10 years ago, specifically the Battle of 10 Mile Forest, which was a final blow to the Orion people, who had put up a remarkably difficult fight." The general nodded in reply and spoke once more. "Why do you think I chose to show you that?" Although Mason wasn't completely sure, he could make an educated guess. "I believe that you are trying to show me the consequence of obtaining new worlds for the Empire without adequate information gathering." "What precisely do you mean?" the general queried. Mason was now getting into his stride, so he answered quickly. The Orion people were famously tenacious, and in the opening stages of the war they managed to deal a fair number of heavy blows to us, mainly because we were unaware of the spore magic that they used to infect and kill many of our soldiers. Although we quickly adapted to this, if we were aware of this from the beginning, many fairy soldiers would have survived the conflict. An older man approached Mason this time, nodding his head seemingly in agreement. He looked entirely unassuming, with the sole exception of the Fleet Admiral's crest in his breast pocket. This time he chose to speak. "And so, you are aware of the value of information, aren't you? From the preliminary report we have received from your university, the worlds you have discovered are in a plane with minimal aether, yet they've seemingly managed to build a flourishing civilization. I assume your report includes how this is possible, along with any ways they could have potentially weaponized the aether available to them." "Yes, sir," Mason replied confidently. "I've included all the ways they could have weaponized it, along with an estimation of the culture and the litany of other details." "Well, let's get on with it, shall we?" called out General Moletta, a distinguished lady who was famous for her cool head during battle. Mason nodded in reply and stood at the podium on the opposite side of the room. "This is going to take a while, so I advise that you get comfortable." And so, to summarize what I said, they are almost certainly a peaceful people, as their level of cooperation needed to utilize such an abysmal amount of aether is unheard of. This would ideally mean an easy conquest. However, they are most likely stronger and taller than us, as that is the trend in planes with less aether, due to their biology having to adapt to such conditions. Nevertheless, this also means that they are far less individually capable of using magic than us fairies. Even if their constructs were completely efficient, this wouldn't be enough to combat us due to our people having access to far more of it. My advice would be to immediately target their aether constructs, as it would cripple whatever wartime capability such as evidently peaceful people would have. Thank you all for the opportunity to present to you this information." Mason bowed before everyone present, hoping that his presentation went off without a hitch. Apparently it did, given the applause they were giving him. He heard a few of those present talk to each other in hushed tones, probably discussing how they were going to divvy up these newly discovered worlds. General Hurst approached him once more, this time with a smile on his face. Mason opened his mouth to speak, but the general raised a hand to cut him off. "Please, you've done enough for the Council of Acquisition, so just relax. Kudos, by the way. This is looking to be the best addition to the Empire in a long, long time. Perhaps the best addition ever, but we have yet to see what exactly this new civilization is capable of. You'll most certainly receive something significant for your discovery. Perhaps even a title from the Empress herself. How do you like the sound of that, Lord Mason Renner?" "That might be the most beautiful combination of syllables that I have ever heard. I generally don't know what to say, sir." "It's fine. You'll have time to take it in. Regardless, I wanted to talk to you about the actual upcoming conquest, or rather, what comes afterwards. These people are clearly innovative, so I think that we shouldn't be too harsh on them when we take over. Otherwise, who knows what they could come up with." "Are you suggesting that we might lose, sir?" Mason replied, shocked that a member of the Council of Acquisition would ever suggest such a thing. "Mason, losing is always a possibility. Just because we haven't suffered a defeat doesn't mean that we won't ever be defeated. After all, it was that mentality that led to the Orions dealing us many painful blows," said the general, with an air of seriousness around him. "I guess being this high up in the military as him counts as his own stresses, huh? I've never even thought that a fairy general would ever consider losing. I guess I should be as meticulous as possible when it comes to researching these new people, at the very least, to ease the mind of General Hurst." "Of course, sir. I will conduct further research into this new world and immediately inform you of the results."
"Good lad,"
he replied, while patting Mason's shoulder at the same time. "Sir, if I may, what is your opinion on this new people?" The general took a few seconds to process the question, looking at the four while doing so.
"Perhaps in time they could ascend to second-class citizens due to their peaceful nature and innovativeness. If they found a way to utilize such meager aether, who knows what else they could think of. At the very least, the conquest of their world should lead to a few orders of magnitude increase in aether efficiency."
Sounds like a cookie-cutter answer. I wonder if I can get the truth out of him. Is that really what you think, sir?
General Hurst looked at Mason directly, which caused his hairs to stand on end. "Okay, crap. Did I fuck up? He's angry. Better fix this, and quickly. I'm sorry, sir. My question was extremely The general raised up a hand once again to cut Mason off. "No, that isn't what I really think. I think that this would be a difficult conquest on the level of the Orions, though if I say so to my peers, few will listen. And so, the most I can do is try and keep the soldiers under my command alive." Mason was shocked still by the earth-shattering revelation. However, a strange sense of morbid curiosity took over him.
"May I ask why you think so, sir?"
General Hurst took a swig of his golden flask. Mason recognized the faint smell, as it was the same as the liquid that the strange man offered him earlier. "It's my gut feeling, Mason. I've got the gut feeling that there's something strange about this one, and my gut has never failed me before."
End of chapter. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Bezic, Try Again 95, Fudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Ithilia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.